right. Even though culture shock, as we all know, is a sure thing, the way that we experience it will differ from person to person. So, to start, I would like to introduce myself and explain how I got here. I'm a second-year graduate student of the University of Central Missouri. Yeah. After finishing my BA in Modern Languages for Spanish at UCM, I began working towards my MSc in TESL, a lot of acronyms. I've been a student worker, hello, join us. I've been a student worker at UCM's Study Abroad office since the spring of 2021. Come in, join the party. And I've been working with undergraduate students and giving presentations about study abroad opportunities as part of a two-person office. It's kind of stressful. And it was a bit rough for a couple of years there for obvious reasons. But I'm so thrilled to say that our students are overwhelmingly excited to be doing international travel again, and there's a lot of excitement in that area. And in fact, our numbers are actually pretty much back up to what they were pre-2020, which is really exciting that it's happened in such a fairly short time frame. I should also mention that I've been an ESL instructor at UCM's English Language Institute for over a year and a half now. The director of the ELI, Valerie Hemming, was unfortunately unable to attend today. Thank you, Gabriel, for stepping in for her. The director, in the summer of 2021, she took a chance on hiring a recently graduated kid with a passion for languages and travel, and for that I will be eternally grateful. It's propelled me into all these amazing opportunities. My ESL classroom is made up of adults and undergrads in an intensive English program, and some have families with them, but a lot of them come to study for a semester or an academic year only. Many of them are the only ones from their entire country, and no one else in their vicinity speaks their native language. As anyone who has tried living in another country will tell you, flipping that switch in your brain to basically speaking and living in another language 24/7 is exhausting. So just imagine what that's like. As far as travel is concerned, I've been extremely fortunate to have had opportunities to travel so often from a relatively young age. I've gone to Japan as a student ambassador with the Heart of America Japan America Society. I've gone to visit family in St. Petersburg and Moscow. I've gone on study abroad programs in Amman, Jordan, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Fez in Morocco, Berlin, Munich, and several cities in Spain for various durations of time. My longest time abroad, though, was when I was 19, terrified, and I spent a semester of my sophomore year in Malaga, Spain. It's this gorgeous coastal city in the southernmost part of the country, and I spent the first few weeks in paradise, especially coming from landlocked Missouri. It was wonderful. But then the weather changed, it got colder as the seasons changed, it got rainy, and I became pretty badly depressed for a couple of weeks. I recovered, and those were still 3 of the best months of my entire life, but it was rough for a bit. At the time, I didn't really recognize that for what it was, which was a symptom of culture shock. Yay! And actually, another student in the same program had such a difficult time that they actually left 2 weeks into the program, giving up a semester of school, thousands of dollars, and a truly life-changing opportunity. All this because that student was woefully unprepared for how things would be living in a new and unfamiliar environment. It is really cases like this that illustrate just how important it is to understand how it feels to be a fish out of water in a place and in a culture that is not familiar to our own cultures. So I talk with my students, the ones whom I advise in the Study Abroad office, before they go on semester, 1 month, 2 month, academic year programs, multiple year programs. And I tell them that culture shock is inevitable, no matter how prepared you think you are. So in order to combat that, it is necessary to know some steps you can take, including getting yourself familiarized with the environment, finding some sort of a home base, I always like to say. It can be a cafe, a bookstore, a a park bench, just wherever you feel comfortable. Also forming a routine, getting to know your environment and meeting people and making friends. So now, if you all wouldn't mind, I would like you to look at page 1 of the handouts that are on the chairs here. If you could pass those out, there should be enough for everybody. You'll see some get to know you questions. It might sound silly, but this is what I do in all of my classes to not only get to know my students and they get to know me, but also for them to have another opportunity inside class to get to know each other. So it improves morale and makes everyone feel just a tad bit more comfortable. It also lightens the mood. So if you wouldn't mind, please, we're going to go ahead and take 10 or so minutes. So just go through those questions. Feel free, you can choose a couple, you can go through all of them if you would like, but just talk with your neighbors and really get to know everybody. Thank you all so much for having these wonderful conversations and talking with everyone and getting to know each other. I think that's a really beautiful thing. So just to kind of get back into the speechifying, several students I spoke with mentioned common struggles we're all familiar with, issues with dietary restrictions and how different foods and food portions, in the US especially, language barrier, and interpersonal communication, which the last point is something I would like to expound upon a little bit if you'd like. A lot of students expressed surprise and initial discomfort with the level of familiarity that exists between teachers and students. Speaking with a professor or a coordinator, school chair, dean of higher ed, anything, is unheard of in many places, much less calling them by their first name. That kind of informality is one of the main reasons why some of my students have found it kind of difficult to approach me with questions or concerns, in spite of what I hope is unwavering supportiveness and approachability. But that being said, one of the main things that remain constant throughout all of my conversations with both incoming and outgoing international students was that the single most important factor in their degree of comfort was the amount of empathy and understanding that was in their environment. The experience of finding someone who can relate to you is extremely gratifying and comforting. It's about really creating an atmosphere of home in an unfamiliar place. One student commented that it's very refreshing to come across people who experience the same thing in any capacity, especially when they can look at you and say, I get it, I've been there. Culture shock really isn't a negative thing. It's just something happens until you adapt. A lot can happen before you're able to adapt, but the more times that you experience it, the more easily you're able to get through it and recognize the process and overcome it. That same student said, it's inevitable the amount of things we take for granted. Ways of life are done without thinking. I think that's a really powerful statement. I recently drove 2 international students from the airport MCI to Warrensburg and tried to look at the same drive into the small town of Warrensburg as they would through fresh eyes. All of a sudden, the hills and endless fields seemed stunning and vast, and the stars in the sky shone brighter. I realized that there was no light pollution to dull their beauty. Even walking through the massive beast that is the Walmart Supercenter seemed less a daunting and frankly irritating task than an exciting adventure filled with possibility. To assume that there's only one way to live is completely wrong, and I feel like sometimes we live in a bubble, and it's important to look beyond that really whenever possible. When I spoke with the students who had come to the US from other countries, so many of them stressed the importance and value of empathy and patience, whether that was from teachers, having patience with homework and projects, but also from people in the town, taking time to let people answer. English language learners often need to translate rapid English speech into their native language, come up with an answer, translate it back to English, and then respond. So many non-native English speakers have expressed frustration to me about others infantilizing them because of their strong accent or lack of complex vocabulary. In addition to the language barrier, there can be cultural differences that manifest in language. One student explained his struggle with taking a long time to formulate a response when he first came to the US. Although he was pretty much fluent in English, he still had to take time to develop culturally appropriate responses in conversation due to the differences in direct and indirect and formal and informal speech between his home country and the States, which is something that I didn't really even consider all that much, besides the obvious language difference. He explained to me how it took him a long time to understand the best ways to have his point understood and to not have any miscommunications. That can really be a big challenge for a lot of people who are unaccustomed to American culture. So it is very necessary for teachers, especially, to be patient and understanding. So I would like to ask some questions of you all again. For your convenience, I have included them on the back of the handout that you all just looked at. So if you're not yet, please go ahead and turn to page 2 on the back here. So we've got about 7 questions here. We're going to take about 20 minutes to go through these because I think they're all really important to discuss. The first one here, how do you define culture, is a very basic, low bar, first semester culturally responsive teaching kind of question. But I feel like it's still very important to at least come to your own understanding and develop your own definition of what you feel like culture is to you so that you can base all of your other opinions and responses off of that. Then from there on, we have what experiences have you had that have shaped your own understanding of culture, not just in the theoretical sense, but in a practical way. If you could speak to yourself as a beginner instructor or just as a younger person, what would you say? Have you ever experienced culture shock? What was it like? And what did others around you do or say to make you feel more comfortable in your environment? How can you support the new generations of teachers in international education if you are yourself an instructor or a person in international education? How can your own experiences with loneliness, alienation, and other struggles influence your teaching philosophy, your life philosophy? And lastly, how are some ways that you can support students' mental health? And really, immigrants, anyone who is a non-native English speaker, everyone around you, their own mental health when dealing with symptoms of culture shock. So please, you don't need to answer all of these. You can pick a couple of them that you find interesting, and I just want to have a conversation going about this. So go ahead and take 20 minutes and we'll come back then. So we've just about reached the end of our time together, so I wanted to leave you with some words here. Everybody! Feel like a teacher. All right, so again, I'm thrilled to see everyone sharing their own experiences of not really knowing how you fit in, how you got to where you are. Imposter syndrome, I know that's a huge thing that I've dealt with, and I feel like a lot of people in this field do. But it's all relevant when we're relating to each other and to our students, whom we're advising, whom we're teaching, and just whom we're interacting with. Existing in an increasingly interconnected world, it's vital to experience that kind of empathy and express it outwards whenever possible. So thank you all so much for being here with me today, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.